So I'm Dan Little, and I'm very happy to join in conversation with Doug McAdam. Doug, welcome.
Thank you.
Doug is professor of sociology at Stanford University and also director of the Institute for Urban Studies.
Director of the Urban Studies program. Right.
Great. Well, it's a good crossing and a good foundation, I think, for some of the topics that we'll be talking about today. Just a little framing of the purpose for these interviews. I'm a philosopher of the social sciences, and I'm myself, and have been for a long time, dissatisfied with the state of the social sciences. That there's a kind of positivist tradition, strain, which kind of forms so much of the thinking that both philosophers and social scientists do. And yet, society is just different from the natural world. So it just seems compelling to me that we need to frame our thinking about the science of society or scientific approaches to society in new terms, in different terms. So the purpose of these interviews is to pick out some really innovative social scientists who are not captivated by a single picture of what the social sciences should look like, who've done really interesting, innovative work, and you are certainly one of those people.
Thank you.
And so the purpose of the interview is just to kind of allow you to reflect a little bit about your own work, about how you came to the trajectory of research and inquiry that you've had, and also how you think the social sciences can do a better job of understanding this fluid, plastic, contingent social world that we live in. So, welcome.
Compelling agenda. I love it.
And in kind of thinking back over your career, almost everything that you've done has had to do with social movements, the politics of contention, the social mobilization. And as I was kind of thinking about that, I was thinking, this is really interesting material. Some people might say it is peripheral, that it's just one piece, but that the greater social world is much bigger than that.
Right.
But my perception is that there's a different way of looking at it, that actually social contention and mobilization actually captures a huge range of social behavior, social action. So you might say, actually, it's the core, it's not the periphery. I wonder what you'd say about that.
I don't know if I'd say it's the core, but I do not see this as a peripheral topic in any way, shape, or form. Where do we even start? There's a number of ways in which I think the kind of things that interest me are central to an understanding of social life. One is, contention writ large. People say, well, you study social movements. I've never thought of myself as studying social movements. That is narrow, in my view. There's not a lot of bona fide social movement activity in the world. Contention is all around us. And I've always, my biggest interest in the study of contention is to see the social world as organized into worlds. It could be an organization, it could be a formal institutional structure like the educational system or electoral politics in the United States, or restaurants in Paris as a field. And there's always challenges to entrenched authority in any of the social worlds we inhabit. In that sense, contention is all around us. So if you imagine the phenomenon of study as formal social movements, that to me that's never interested me. It's what are the circumstances under which sort of emergent challenges to entrenched authority can actually get traction. And the whole phenomena of emergent collective action fascinates me at a deeper level, one deeper level of remove, in that I am a total creature of habit. I wake up in the morning and I grab a hold of my normative routines. That's how I structure my day. I'm fascinated. It would take me a lot to move. It would take a lot to move me beyond those sort of normative routines. So the idea that people would actually get it together to begin to act in new and innovative way is something of a puzzle to me. It's not something I gravitate to. It's not something that most of us gravitate to. We are stress-reducing creatures. Normative routines reduce the stress of everyday life. And yet, people do in fact mobilize and begin to act in innovative ways quite often. So understanding the kind of social processes under which that occurs has always intrigued me. So, I mean, in that sense, when you start thinking about it that way, I don't see this as a peripheral topic at all. I mean, some people have said in sociology there's only two real big questions, and one's the question of order. That is, how do we produce these kind of enduring normative routines day after day after day? How does structure endure? And the other is, how does, in the face of all that, all the investment, both as society and as individuals, all the investment we have in those routines and in structure, how does change ever happen? So for me, the issue of change and contention, challenges to entrenched authorities always intrigued me. And I don't see it as peripheral at all.
And you make the point at several points in your writings that actually there are lots of sources of conflict and conflict of interest and even oppression which do not result in collective action.
Absolutely.
Jim Scott refers to everyday forms of resistance, which are quiet, unobservable, not collective action, but cutting down a tree to prevent the cultivator from getting to the rice paddy.
Right.
So, and I think it's a really important point, because the point you were making a minute ago, that social mobilization is sort of rare, actually.
Right. It is.
And yet the sources of conflict and the sources of potential mobilization
are all
are
around.
endemic.
Exactly, and that's why it's such an interesting puzzle, because objectively, we never lack for sources of grievance, objective sources of grievance, and cleavages in society. And yet, they don't routinely produce collective action. If in fact our models showed that this was a very determinate process, that once you had this and this and they came together, boom, you had mobilization, this wouldn't be interesting to study. A case in point, I mean, this has been one of my pet peeves for a long time. Social movement scholars basically go out and they select successful instances of mobilization to study. They select on the dependent variable.
Right.
And they wind up, I think, producing a kind of Ptolemaic view of the world. Look, the whole universe revolves around these things called social movements. We shouldn't be studying successful instances of mobilization. We should be studying mobilization attempts, populations at risk for mobilization, something that makes this a much more contingent enterprise. So I, for the longest time, I was trying to think, well, how do we anticipate where mobilization might occur? I understand, practically speaking, why the researcher gravitates towards, look, there's a movement, let's go study it.